Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. I'm your host, John Abbas, and I want to thank you for being with me today as I interview an incredible guest that you are going to love. But I just appreciate you being with me as we bring on all kinds of really incredible people that are building amazing things in an effort to learn and use their philosophies, their wisdom, their strategies so that you can go out and build your own successes. Today's guest, I promise you, will definitely not disappoint. Before I bring them on, if you could just hit that subscribe button, whether it's on Apple or YouTube or just whatever platform you're listening to. I just want to make sure that you get a notification every time I release a new episode. And I have some great guests lined up that you're not going to want to miss. Okay, so with that being said, today I have a very special guest that's going to talk about something that you are going to want to listen to. In fact, I was so excited about this interview and how much I think it's going to blow you away that I moved it forward several weeks so that I could get it out to you sooner. Jim Gale is the founder of one of the coolest companies I've ever heard of. And I'm not just saying that. He's the founder of Food Forest Abundance. And what they are is they're a company that helps average people all over the country and in other countries effortlessly grow their own food. It doesn't matter how big or small your yard is. His company can actually take pictures. You go out and take a picture of your yard, your lawn, or a small portion of it, and they'll design like step-by-step blueprints. They'll design full-on blueprints and step-by-step instructions on how to grow all of your own fruits and vegetables and more. You can literally do it yourself, like easily, or you can just like hand the blueprint to a landscaper and soon you'll be able to save thousands of dollars. You'll be able to grow your own organic food. You eat 10 times healthier, and you'll have a badass story to tell your friends and neighbors at the next dinner party. I just think it's the coolest thing. I went on his website. I can't wait personally to do it at my own rental properties. My own personal home, we don't have a yard, but all my rental properties we do, and most of them are Airbnbs. And so as short-term rentals, I think it would be such a cool thing to offer guests the ability to not only have a great place to stay, but pick their own fruits and veggies and cook them for dinner for their family. I'm jacked up about this episode. So in this interview, Jim shares his story, talks about why everyone should grow their own food forest and exactly how it all works. I just know you're going to love this chat. So guys, sit back and enjoy the show. Jim, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being on here today. I'm excited to have you share some amazing wisdom with the audience.
Well, thank you, John. I'm excited to share everything I can. It's been an incredible journey, and I think your audience is going to love it. I think they're going to be blown away. I was just speaking in Texas, and I had dozens of people come up to me afterwards crying, but happy. I'm just seeing a path forward, seeing that we are in tough times and they're going to get worse for some people, but for some people, they're actually going to get better. And when we can show people how that happens, it feels good.
Absolutely. And I was telling you before we hit the record button, I get a lot of potential guests in my inbox, and, a lot of them do similar things, right? Like coaches or business. And when I read your bio, is the most unique thing I've ever seen. And I have a lot of questions for you today because I want to be a customer, and those listening, you will see I can imagine 100% of my listeners are going to be not only blown away by this interview, but they're going to be so interested in doing what you teach. And I'm just really excited. So as the owner of Food Forest Abundance, I wanted to start and just ask if you could share with everyone, like, what you do, what your amazing company does before we get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay. So we help people grow food in such a logical and wonderful way. We use a science called permaculture, which means permanent culture. It's an agricultural design science that was founded originally by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren back about 50, 60 years ago. And the science basically takes all of the wisdom that has been accumulated over the centuries by growers. They say, if you put this plant with this plant, you're going to have good luck. If you put this plant with this plant, they're going to compete and one of them's going to probably die. If you put this into your soil, layers of soil, you're probably going to get a better yield based on all this science. And then what happened once they started this network of permaculturalists, now you've got millions of people around the world that are gaining incredible knowledge about how to create food forests everywhere, and in a way that's literally as much maintenance as the jungle outside your house or the forest down the street from your house. How much,
Hmm.
who maintains that forest? Nobody.
Nobody.
Nature. The difference is these forests are designed to produce a maximum amount of food with zero maintenance. That's what everybody's yard can be.
That's like, I told you, everybody listening, that you would be super excited. And that's what got me so excited. It's just like your company helps people like me, busy people, entrepreneurs, like how to maximize a portion of their yard, no matter how big, no matter how small, and turn it into a sustainable food forest and grow your own food, which I know everybody wants to do. And so I pretended when I built this interview that I was going to be your best customer because I'm so interested. And so I have like a list of questions, but
Awesome.
before I get into those, I just really want to hear the story. I listened to you in another interview. I really, above and beyond all this, I love your philosophy on a lot of things, like a lot. But I would really just love to have you share your story. Like, how did you end up doing this to make your impact in the world?
Oh gosh. So it starts, I guess, the first time I created a vision for myself. I was 19 and my coach said, everybody on the team, I was a wrestler, they said, write your goals. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh God, what a pain in the ass. I don't want to deal with that. There's papers and pens involved. Like, I'm not a big fan of the traditional school system. So anyway, I started writing, and then something changed in my being. And I started living what I was visualizing. I started putting myself out into the future in a way that was compelling and inspiring. And I wrote down, I was a failure. The 2 years previous, I did horribly. And so when I wrote down that I wanted to be a three-time All-American and national champion, the coach laughed and he said, that's probably not attainable, but it didn't matter because I had
Right.
already lived it in my mind and in my heart. I ended up being a four-time All-American national champ, inducted to the Hall of Fame, and I was elected captain of my wrestling team like 2 months after writing my goals. And because I
Wow.
changed, the person that left the wrestling room on Friday and the person that came back on Monday morning writing my goals that weekend were two different people.
Hmm.
So the most important thing for everybody is a compelling vision of the future, whether that be an hour from now or a year from now or 100 years from now. A compelling vision is what draws us forward. So then I traveled. I went to, after college, moved to Hawaii, lived there for 4 years. Was in the bar restaurant business, had a lot of fun. Prince was at my bar on New Year's, and that was just awesome because I'm from Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah, my little bar in a strip mall. There he is, right? We had great musicians. So then I wrote my goals again when I was 29, about 10 years later. And I was broke. I was living in Surfers Paradise, Australia. And I wrote that I wanted to have $3 million in 3 years. Money was my focus because I was broke. And when you're broke,
Yep.
you want money, right? Well, I ended up writing my goals and keeping them general as far as what I was going to do, just knowing that I was going to use what I had been taught by Dennis Waitley and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Napoleon Hill and all these masters of creation and manifestation. Fantastic. Everybody should be, aware of those artists, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wrote down again my goals, and then 3.5 years later, I just through a series of miraculous events, my company did $1.3 billion in sales in 3.5 years. I bought a boat and went to live on the ocean, thinking I was retired. That whole retired thing is such a silly illusion. I was so
It,
immature.
it really is.
Yeah, it's boring as shit.
It
So
it is. It's like once you get the money out of the way, you realize that, like, I mean, I don't know about you, but like when me and my wife, we built wealth for ourselves the first go around, it's like we lived a period of like real confusion for a while
yeah,
because we're just like, it's always been such a simple focus, just money.
yeah,
And then you get there and you're just like, well, where's the purpose? Where's the passion? Where's the fulfillment? And then you have to go on this whole other search. I don't know if it was like that for you, but
it
yes.
was. It was. I started a foundation called the Wisdom Foundation. My goal was to get emotional intelligence, which is basically all of the wisdom of the masters taught in schools across the country. I started speaking at schools, and the teachers were offended by my message. Not all of them. Some of them were saying, "Jim, I'm so inspired." But more than I was shocked
Yep.
as to how many of these teachers were offended by my message. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like offended. And then I realized it was just really lately in the last 15 years that I realized, right? I saw clearly what was happening, right? The
That's
programming
right.
and all that stuff. So then I moved to Costa Rica, and this is where I was a developer. And the first thing I did was buy a fruit tree nursery, or build a fruit tree nursery on our property, turning a cattle pasture into an incredible golf course with fruit trees and berry bushes lining the fairways. Well, I got heavy criticism. Like,
Hmm.
like crazy people were coming after me saying I was a destroyer and all this stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? But here's the thing about criticism. It's free consult. There is
That's right.
something in there. Usually, if you hear it and it sticks in your mind, then there's probably something to listen to. So I invited the critics into my office, and they came in swinging. I mean, like just saying I was all this bad guy stuff. And I'm like, I think I'm doing good. My goal is to get their endorsement. But that
Right.
didn't happen because I was just so naive to this idea of hatred and the way they came. But
Right.
so they talked about permaculture. Now, this is 2007. That year for me was a big year. I had my first two daughters, which is a life changer because now something is more important than me. Right?
That's
And
right.
like way more, like I would die without thought for my daughters, like yourself, right? It's just
That's right.
how a lot of parents do it. So I learned that I learned permaculture, and I also learned that the governmente, the people controlling our world, do not have our best interest in mind. And then I went really deep into that
Yeah.
understanding and understanding. So that's when I went through about 2 years of cognitive dissonance, studying the problem every day, all day long. And then I read Bill Mollison's quote: though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And I started to bawl.
Yeah, I got chills when I listened to you say that in the other interview. I was like, what a amazing quote. Like, really.
Yeah, it's so profound and so true. The reason it's so profound is because it's true. So then, for 15 years now, I've been obsessed with this idea and the Napoleon Hill quote, too. There's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. And when you combine these quotes and all the other wisdom of the masters, then my obsession is, what is the embarrassingly simple solution? And I know it's permaculture because it's not a hypothetical. It's proven all over the world that permaculture reverses mass extinction and deforestation and cancer and heart disease and diabetes, and it literally takes out the foundation of our enslavement and ignorance. And so then this idea whose time has come, it all came, and now we have it. I got the chills. We literally have the solution, and I'll unpack a little bit of that during your show, and it's going to blow everybody's minds.
I can't wait. And it's you said it and you mentioned it a couple of times, but I believe the same thing. Like my passion is education. I own a large preschool, and you said something in your other interview that's the same exact thing. It's just like the government wants control, you
Yeah.
know. It's so easy to grow your own food and become self-sustaining, but yet governments are more interested in mass producing it, like enslaving people. And it's the same thing with education. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, 4 years of your life. It's like the biggest waste just to get out there and realize that you didn't really learn anything. And there's just such a better way to do it. And so I love that this is the path that you decided to go down. And so I'm just like really, really excited. And so I have my list of questions. So can you explain a little bit, like first, what is a food forest for the listeners? Like it can be as small or as large as you want, correct?
Yeah, the Amazon rainforest is one of the largest food forests in the world, probably the largest. And people go, "What are you talking about?" Well, look it up. The Amazon rainforest was a designed and created food forest 5,000 years ago. And when the
Hmm.
people left, that's what happens to a food forest. It's expansive by its very nature. A food forest will continue to grow unless you have logging and deforestation and poisons and mining and all these crazy things that are happening. And that's the way nature is. It's an abundance factory, right?
Right. That's
This
right.
design of source of God, whatever you choose to call it, is epically abundant and giving. And the way that we've designed our communities now is not an ignorant accident. It's a strategic enslavement tool. And I'll get very specific.
Please.
50 years ago, Henry Kissinger said, if you want to control nations, control oil. If you want to
Mm,
control people, control food. If you want to control the world, control the world's currency. Now, what is the
mm,
current? Current in a river is held by the banks. They're all controlled and owned by the same families that have always controlled the world. So then, if that's the problem, and in permaculture, we learn to look at the problem and flip it on its head. If the
right.
problem is the centralization of power in the hands of psychopaths who have led us down the path that we're on now, then the solution is decentralization of power. And then how do we do that? I ask a lot of questions. What's the
Right.
next logical step? How we do that is we grow food instead of lawns. This is the one embarrassingly simple solution. When we simply use our properties wisely and use that resource to create food instead of a lawn, we change everything.
It's so crazy that you have such a big philosophy wrapped up in such a simple concept. Like, and it's such a powerful thing. It really is. And so, I know people like me when I first read it, I have always been interested in potentially like having a garden. I I think the barrier to entry for a lot of people is they maybe overcomplicate it in their mind. They think it's a ton of work, a ton of maintenance. It's so much to get started. So like how simple is it? How do you
Oh, I
guys make it
love
so
it.
simple for people?
I love that because that is the layers. When Kissinger said this isn't the ramblings of some just street guy. This
That's right.
is the strategy spoken by the guy whose job it was to come up with and to implement the strategy. The man who was the head of the Council of Foreign Relations and has met with every US president. Right. So then,
That's right.
how easy is it? Okay, let's just take an example that everybody gets. Let's take a peach tree or an apple tree or a
Mhm.
raspberry bush or a blueberry bush, right? How much effort does it take to maintain one of these trees or bushes? A lot of times we're walking through the nature and we find these bushes. In
That's
northern
right.
Minnesota, there's blueberry bushes everywhere, raspberries everywhere. Who maintains them? Nobody.
Nobody.
Nature does the job. So it's literally that easy to grow food. It starts with proper, thoughtful design. Design in the permaculture way is the start of everything. Then from there, when you put it in and you install it properly, then you literally have a food forest. Now, there are times, especially in drought or climactic events, where you have to protect your food forest or maybe give it a little extra water at the beginning or in times of severe drought. After that, it's a set it and forget it and just take the abundance.
That's crazy. And so like I don't know if there's any rule of thumb like with how much food. I mean, I guess it really depends on what you're growing. But let's say like do you have any kind of rule of thumb like a 10 by 10 or a 20 by 15 could feed like what amount of space would you need to create a food forest that could feed like your own family?
So let's go on a tray of microgreens, a 10-inch by 20-inch tray of microgreens. And let's say you have four of them sitting on your countertop, right?
Okay.
Because now we're talking about what, 6 square feet or so. Which is, you can put that in the corner with some LED lights under the cupboards above. And now you'll have a salad for two people every single day of the week. And not just any salad, but a salad that's 4 to 40 times more nutrient dense than adult broccoli or kale or peas or any of these things. Right. And it takes, here's how much time it takes, less time once you get in the rhythm of it, which, you know, you might take a couple hours at the beginning to kind of learn
Of
the
course.
process, and you might lose a couple trays, which will cost you $1.50 each. But once you get in the process, you're talking about less time than it takes to brew your coffee in the morning.
Jeez, that's crazy. And I know, I'm sure you have some really crazy statistics because I've heard you say a few of them. But like, can you share with the listeners like a couple maybe shocking statistics like on just the impact that would be made if a percentage of people were to like adopt your philosophy and what you're teaching and grow their own food?
Yes, and I want to unpack a couple things. You did ask what is a food forest, and I do want to explain that. And then I want
Yeah,
to talk
please.
about the statistics. A food forest isn't a fruit tree or a series of fruit trees. A food forest is layers of food starting underground. So now you've got your potatoes and sweet potatoes and turmeric and ginger and yucca and taro and all these roots and tubers. On the herbaceous layer, now you've got your mushrooms and a lot of your herbs. Then you've got your shorter bushes and your taller bushes and your shorter fruit trees and your taller fruit trees. And then you've got your vines. So when you look at a food forest, it's not one layer. It's
Hmm.
literally underground all the way up to the overstory in one area. So a peach tree guild, for instance, is not just a peach tree, but it's a peach tree with all sorts of plants around the base of the peach tree. So now your ROI, and a lot of people love to talk ROI, right? Which is
That's right.
layered. And this gets into your other question. The ROI for one peach tree put in the corner of your yard is going to be in the hundreds of percentile within the first 4 or 5 years. That's just a peach tree. When you add on the guild and the plants that are underneath it, all that stuff I was talking about, berries, you can have 3 different types of berries and all sorts of herbs and spices and other edibles in one peach tree guild. Now you've got 100% ROI within 18 to 24 months. Where else are you going to get that kind of ROI? But that's just
Right.
cash. And this is where people think it takes time to be in a food forest, or that's the opposite. It actually gives you time. It gives you time and money. Most people, they go to work and they work to get money, and then they take that money and drive to the grocery store and they
That's
harvest their food from the grocery store at a price that's going up astronomically
every
instead
day.
of way less energy input, walking out into your backyard. And guess what? When you have a food forest, it draws you in because it feels good.
That's right.
Standing in a food forest gives you life.
That's so crazy. Like, it's just like one of those ideas that you're like, this is the greatest idea ever.
Yeah.
And so, statistics wise, if even like 10% of people were to start doing this, like, what would we be looking at?
So we would be looking at the reversal of deforestation and mass extinction and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and tyranny. That's exactly what we'd be looking at. And I can't wait to share how that's going to happen. Um,
Please.
yeah. So the US, there's 40 million acres of lawn just here. Our goal is 50% of that. But the first goal, there's a number that is in when you're in a new product, that's a good product is going to market. You've got the pioneer stage, which we've been in now for a lot ever. And then
Yep.
you've got your early adopters. And then it gets up to, I believe it's 9.2%. Once it gets to that, then it goes rocketing up to mass adoption. Right. So the
Mm,
number you use is what if 10%? Well, first of all, if 10% of people did this, then everybody would do this because it makes sense on every level. It's the
that's
best
right.
thing for selfish reasons. It's the best thing that I could do for me, myself, my family, my wallet, my bank, my health, for every reason. Right. So when you stack that, when we get to 10%, it's going to go boom. And here's how we're going to get to 10%. This came to me. I do a lot of meditation and I
Yep.
ask a lot layers and layers of questions because we are at war, and the puzzle to winning the war is to put all the pieces together.
Right.
So then I said, okay, we know the answer to all of it. Why isn't it? And then I stopped. I go, wait a minute. How can it be adopted by the masses? I called a meeting 2 Fridays ago with a bunch of people, world-class entrepreneurs. Darren Olean, who won the Emmy last year,
Mm,
and just many, many more amazing people. And I explained our strategy, to change the world? And every one of them said they're in. Now imagine this, on the 4th of July, and I would love your help with this, John, we are
Yeah.
going to jointly explain to the world what freedom means on a physical and a metaphysical level. We are going to put the same message out through hundreds of influencers with hundreds of millions in their audiences the same day, the same message, and this is the message. It's going to change the world. We're going
I'm
to
ready.
elevate the consciousness of humanity on the 4th of July.
What's the message?
The message is grow food. And then the other piece of the puzzle is we have a digital asset. And now this gets really freaking mind blowing. The currency that our world uses is born in liability to society. It is an energy and time expense. And then, of course, the fiat currency is a complete enslavement tool, right?
Right.
The Fed is not a Fed. That's a lie. The name is a lie, right? It's a privately held entity that we are not allowed to audit. Ron Paul's been trying to audit it for like 40 years.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And it's going to shit. It's shit, and we're going to turn it into compost, and we're going to grow food out of that. Right. So that's what fiat should be used for, is turning. In fact, we're going to turn a lot of fiat, billions of dollars of fiat, into food. So the coin that we are releasing is called Topia. And the coin is mined by the producers of our society, not the gamers. The producers who actually grow food say, hey, I've got a food forest. Well, then we take that Topia, that asset, that store of value, that barter exchange mechanism, and we decentralize the currency of our world in the hands of the producers instead of in the hands of the looters.
Wow. You've really thought all of this through. This is incredible. That's
Very
that's
much.
so, and I hate to do this. I just want, can I ask some like
Anything.
dummy questions, like for me,
Anything.
because like I'm so sold on doing this myself, and my wife is too, but there's just some things that I was thinking of. The first is so your company does a design, and so let's just say, Jim, I'm ready to do this. Your company can take like a space, like I just say, hey, I'm going to devote this portion of my yard, and you guys help come up with a plan of like what to plant
Yeah.
and how to prepare it. Is
That's
that right?
we come up with what's called a food forest landscape design or blueprint, right? It's a very
Mm,
much like an architectural document where it literally lays out, it takes your yard an account of first your agricultural zone, right? Because we want to make sure the plants that we plant thrive in your zone already. Then we
perfect.
take your videos and pictures of your space and we Google Earth it. And then we talk with you. And then we say, what are your goals? Do you want more annuals? And we do suggest annuals now because annuals provide food in 45 to 120 days typically. So we definitely need annuals planted. Potatoes and sweet potatoes are my favorites
Yep.
because they save a lot of lives in history. They're easy to grow. So then we layer in all the layers of the blueprint, including every plant and exactly where the plant goes within your landscape. And then what we hand you is basically it's an architecturally designed landscape that happens to be foodscaping.
Wow. So, and forgive me if it's a dumb question.
I love
Are
it.
we planting mostly seeds, or are you actually buying plants that are
Um,
already
Yeah. So for the annuals, they're going to be mostly seeds
okay?
because the price of a seed is like a penny or two, where the price of a start, which is 2 weeks later, is
Yep.
250. Right. So
Uh,
now, and that's the difference between time and money. Some people want to save time by spending money. That's great. I do the same thing. Some people don't mind that extra 2 weeks. Now, when it comes to perennials, which are the fruit trees and the berry bushes, we usually buy those in 10-gallon to 20-gallon pots, which means they're 3 to 5 feet tall sometimes, and you can buy them. Maybe they're producing already and they're 3 years old and they're in a 50-gallon pot. The same tree at a 20-gallon pot might be $100. The tree in
mm,
a 50-gallon pot might be $500. So if people want to save time by spending more money, that's up to them. And we help lay out all of those details.
That's so cool. Now, another question I had, and you, man, you explained this so profoundly when I listened to you speak earlier, is like, how do you maintain everything without using like pesticides and chemicals and things like that? Like, how's like, what's that look like, maintenance and upkeep?
It looks like nature. It's diversity. So, for instance, we're building an off-grid community here. It's sold out at Gulf's Landing in Central Florida, and it's on a private lake, which is a miracle to me because I'm a bass fisherman. I love the water, and we've got the only dock on this 400-acre lake. And so, diversity is the foundation of strength, not only in our food supply, but in our society, right? We don't want to
Mm,
be homogeneous. We want to be diversified. We don't want to be like minded. We want to be diversified in mind with one caveat: no force and violence, do no harm, ethics.
right.
Right, that's what permaculture's foundation is. So, like for instance, I go out to my food forest and I sit there and I literally just stand there and watch things because it's so miraculous. And we've got this one plant where some moth laid a bunch of eggs, and the eggs, the butterflies, they're now the larvae, caterpillars, and they're eating all this one particular type of food. Now they're leaving everything else alone because that's how animals are. They're very specific. So this
Hmm.
one thing was eating this one thing, and for the first couple of days, it just got chowed. And then guess what came in? The wasps and the spiders and the geckos and the chameleons came in, and they are our frontline generals. Right? They're our protectors. So what do we do in our society? We get the poison cans out. We start killing the wasps and all these things. That's incredibly nuts when you consider the long-term effects of that. Spiders take out hundreds of millions of metric tons of insects out of the air a year. So you see a spider web near your front door, and now you've got a mosquito trap. And name the spider, be friends with the spider. The spider, it's a beautiful thing. So
Right.
diversity and working with natural systems is the answer.
God, that's so smart.
It's
Just
nature. It's the ultimate
seriously
card.
so smart.
Yeah.
So for somebody, and I have two questions. My first one is, um, what is the maintenance like year round look like? I mean, you said you can leave it to nature and do nothing, but like,
Oh,
let's say it's in your yard and like, what is that? And I feel like most people will love to put their time into it anyway. Like once you see the results and you see food growing, I feel like you just get excited. And like we grew a garden at my preschool, and I mean, it was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever seen. The kids loved it. They love seeing like some work that they did became something, and
yeah,
they were so proud. It's all they talked about with their parents.
yeah.
And I really love that. But as far as just like routine maintenance, like pulling weeds, like I just anything maybe I'm not even thinking of, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
Well, so first of all, there are no weeds in a natural system unless they're created by these same people that I'm not very fond of, right? That GMOs, which do not provide seeds for next year's crop. That's insane, right? And these grasses that are manipulated so they work with the chemicals and the poison. So anyway, so no weeds aside, you are going to have plants that are more competitive, and sometimes some
Hmm.
plants will take over and take the nutrients and the resources from the other plants. So we want to make sure that those plants are suppressed at the beginning, giving time for the plants that we want to thrive and take up the canopy and take up the space. Then, and this is amazing, like what the world needs right now are suppliers and producers. So
That's
you've
right.
heard of pruning fruit trees,
Hmm.
right? So a lot of people, they think of pruning fruit trees as a liability. Well, it takes, let's say, a second to cut off a branch in a particular fruit tree, and most of the time you shouldn't be doing that. But let's say you want to prune the right way. Instead of taking that 10 seconds to cut the branch, take another 2 minutes and put a notch around that tree where the bark is, and put some rooting compound and soil in a tennis ball and tape it on there.
Hmm.
Now 10 weeks later, you've got a $20 fruit tree when you cut that off. So now you turn a liability into an asset, and now you do it at scale. Let's say you have a food forest and you've got hundreds of branches that you can turn into new fruit trees. Like that's how miraculous nature is. And we need that in our world right now. So you can even hire it out, and it'll take 2 minutes per graft, per air layer. And then that'll be worth $20 times as many as you want to do.
This is so smart. Like, I just have to say that, like, for the 50th time.
It's
like,
mind blowing.
like everything you're saying is just like, duh. I was thinking earlier how cool, because my wife and I, we own a lot of like really high end short term rentals that
Yeah.
are on Airbnb and VRBO, and we have this beautiful cabin in Georgia. And the whole time I'm just listening to you in the other interview, I'm like, wow, like how cool would it be that we could create this beautiful food forest, and as a perk to the guests staying there, it's just like, hey, pick your own food for dinner. Like nobody's doing. There's not an Airbnb I've ever seen where you can go do that. You can pick your own fruit and vegetables and cook it for dinner. I'm just like, my wheels are spinning, and I'm like, what
Yes.
other properties can we do this with? I mean, it's such a cool concept. Now, just to ask some questions that I think some of the people might be
I want to share
wondering.
one thing, as you said, the
Please, please.
Airbnbs that I know of that are doing that are booked.
Absolutely.
So keep going.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask, like, because people that listen to this listen all over the world. Like, can you grow in pretty much anywhere? Like, what if somebody lives in Vegas or Arizona or hot? I mean, I know there's extreme climates or like Chicago in the winter. Like, what does that look like?
Anywhere that there are currently plants growing, you can grow a food forest. Now, if you want to see an extreme example, check out Jeff Lawton's Greening the Deserts of Jordan, taking the most inhospitable place in the world, or one of them, and now 10 years later or so, now there's food growing all over the place, right? They found mushrooms in their
Mm,
swales that the local people from the college who study this kind of thing said, there's mushrooms. Oh no, like they've never seen mushrooms before. And Jeff's like, that's great. That's what you want. The mycelial network is the communication. The soil is the immune system for our planet. So, in
right.
fact, I just talked to a guy here who's big into the greening, the citrus greening. He's like, Jim, we've been doing it all wrong. He said, we started building soil, and now we're getting soil building and more production, and there's no citrus greening.
That's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So another evil entity besides the government that I wanted to have you speak on is this term called the HOA. So for the people like myself that are in strict HOAs, like, do you have any suggestions on something that they could do? Like, let's say they don't have a big yard or really much of a yard, but and then the yard that they do have, the HOA has like really strict requirements. Like, are there any options for somebody like that?
Yes, we've had several HOA battles, and when anybody presents a design, that's when the HOA person says, "Oh my gosh, this is great." Because what they imagine when they hear a food forest is they hear of something that just looks crazy as shit. But when they see a beautiful design, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that looks fine." Right? Now, that's one thing. And we're attacking this problem from every level. I'm
Hmm.
meeting tomorrow with a couple Harvard lawyers who are the campaign managers for a guy named Chris who's running for Orlando mayor. And
Mm.
we're getting people sending money. If anybody out there wants to donate to put food forests at schools or churches or community centers or parks, that's what we do. That's my favorite thing in the world. If there was one favorite thing, and that would be food forests at schools all over the world. As
Mm.
as community education sites where the kids are teaching the community what a food forest is and why everybody should have one, right? And of course, learning themselves. So we are going to make this a major part of his platform, putting food forests in opportunity zones, food deserts where the best food around is Church's Chicken or 7-Eleven. We're going, and what'll happen, and this has happened in many places, it will raise the energy of the whole community where people have free access to free, healthy, amazing food. And the nature, the butterflies, the birds, the bees, the vibration of the area will literally rise. And when we demonstrate this in the right strategic kind of way, and we attach it to politics and social media influencers.
Hmm. I love just your vision in general. Like I really do. Now, to somebody that wants to take the first step, like what is there any videos? Like where would somebody start to like
Yeah.
gain a base knowledge on creating a food forest for themselves?
Yep. You can start at our website. It's
Okay.
foodforestabundance.com. And we have a ton of resources there. And we're constantly plugging in new resources. And that's what we
Mm.
do. When I'm going to rest when we've won, when we've reached that tipping point, when we know for certain that we're on the path to freedom and health and abundance as a society. So until then, I'm going to be, and my whole team and everybody else listening, we invite you to join us. Like, let's do this together. Let's collaborate instead of compete. And so, anyway, there's always more coming.
I love that. So my final question is just, and you've really hinted it several times throughout the interview, but what's your grand vision? Like, just when do you know you've won?
We know we've won when they're no longer poisoning the skies and the water and the soil. When people have, we are in the apocalypse, which means lifting the veil, right? It just
Yep.
means seeing clearly, right? We are in it. We are in the ascension. This is the ascension of consciousness of humanity, and there's some force trying to do their best to hold back the ascension, right? Well, spirit always wins because we're creative. We have ideas. They're looters. They're thieves. They steal. They can't create. So we're staying ahead of them by being radically transparent and open and free. And what's going to come of this for those who jump on the consciousness bandwagon, right? Because it's
That's
better in
right.
every way, is epic abundance, like ridiculous, so much abundance that we're going to be like, okay, how do we create this type of, there's just going to be so much abundance in consciousness that I see beautiful, beautiful things to
I love that. Have you ever read Atlas Shrugged?
come. The name of our community is Galt's Landing.
No, are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you.
That is a favorite book of all time. One of
Yeah.
the best books I think ever written. Just like I cannot believe that's the name of your
Isn't
community.
that crazy?
You're kidding me. That's
Yeah. And this
oh
Ringing Cedars is epic as well.
Ringing Cedars.
Yeah, yeah, the Ringing Cedars series. It's more natural, but yeah, Atlas Shrugged. That's our community's named after that.
That's
I
so
love
funny.
that.
So as we finish up, is there any other words of wisdom that you want to just impart on the audience? Because I know they're loving this interview so far. Like, is there anything that you would just want them to take away other than what we've spoke on?
Two real quick and
Please.
logical things. Breathe and focus forward, my friends. There's so much pain and suffering in the world right now. And there's no amount of pain and suffering that you can feel that can help anybody do anything. So lift yourself up first. Faith and courage that we are more than this, that we do and have the power to thrive. Faith and courage is the foundation of freedom. So strategically, intentionally lift your vibration by doing a lot of inner standing, meditation, breath. Just relax your mind and create the future that you want. And the other thing is, if anybody out there listening wants to participate on any level, whether it's to have your own food forest in your yard or to become part of the team, the cooperative is probably the fastest growing cooperative in the world right now. That's the business of helping other people grow food. If you want to be in that business, then get a hold of us.
Awesome. And other than your website, is there any social media place that they can follow your content, which you guys are putting out into the world? Is there a good place to start?
Yeah, we just started. We just hired a podcast team. We're going to be doing that. So foodforestabundance.com, and then we'll send you
Awesome.
newsletters on tips about how to grow food and all this other fun stuff, and then where to find us next.
Awesome. Jan, this has been awesome. I love everything about this interview, your vision, your passion, your enthusiasm. Like, you can always tell when you meet someone that is doing what they're meant to be doing. And it's rare. Like, a lot of people like what they do, a lot of people make money at what they do, but to meet someone that is like doing what they're actually meant to do on this planet, it's a very rare thing. So I know that's you. And so I just want to say thank you for impacting our audience. And I hope as many of them as possible, just fall in line with your vision, man. Thank you.
Let's change your world, my friend. Thank
Let's
you,
do it.
John.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.